At my daughter's wedding, she pulled me aside and said, "Mom, my husband doesn't want you here. You need to leave. Now." I walked out without a word, drove home in silence, didn't cry, didn't scream, just sat in my car in the driveway for hours wondering what I'd done wrong. The next morning, my phone rang. It was her. "Mom, I need the property papers. We have a business plan. We're going to develop the farm." I took a breath and gave her 4 words that changed everything. Words that made her realize who her husband really was. Hey everyone! Before we start, hit subscribe if you're interested in real family stories. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Quick note. This story contains some fictional elements for storytelling purposes, but the message is completely real. If it resonates with you, you're not alone. The pen feels too heavy in my hand. Not because of its weight, it's just a regular ballpoint, nothing fancy. But as I stare down at the signature line waiting for me, it might as well be made of lead. My fingers hover over the paper and I notice they're trembling. Outside the window, rain taps against the glass in August's impatient rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Like someone's fingers drumming on a desk waiting for an answer. Waiting for me to make a choice I can't take back. My phone buzzes. Again. I don't look at it. I already know who it is. Alexis, my only daughter, 23 years old, has been lighting up that screen for 3 days straight now. 52 calls. I've counted every single one. By now, she's probably lost track herself. Susan Matthews sits across from me, patient as a saint. She's been my lawyer for 2 years, ever since Leonard passed, and I needed help understanding the paperwork he left behind. She's the kind of woman who's seen everything women who come to her office carrying invisible weights on their shoulders. Women who have to choose between their hearts and their survival. "Take your time, Joyce," she says softly, pushing a glass of water toward me. There's no rush, but there is. There always is. I look back at the papers spread across her mahogany desk. I've read every page, twice, maybe 3 times. The words irrevocable and permanent are printed in bold, as if the lawyers knew that women like me need the reminder. Once I sign, there's no going back. Not for anything. Not for anyone. The smell of her perfume, something floral expensive, fills the small office. It's different from my world of antiseptic halls and hospital linens. Different from the Georgia clay that never quite washes out from under my fingernails, no matter how hard I scrub. I lift the pen again. 4 words. That's all it took to destroy everything I thought I understood about my daughter. 4 words spoken by Alexis's own mouth 1 year into her marriage to a man I barely knew. 4 simple words that made me realize I didn't know her at all anymore. But that's not where this story starts. Not really. The real story began 3 weeks ago on a sweltering August morning when I drove 90 minutes to a wedding venue outside Atlanta. The story began with a champagne glass trembling in my hands and my daughter asking me to leave. Leonard, my late husband, gone now 14 years, he used to say that sometimes the most important moments in life don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary days. He said you never know which decision will be the one that matters, which choice will echo across the rest of your life. Leonard understood legacy. He understood what it meant to hold something precious and fragile in your hands. Standing in this office now, pen suspended above paper, I finally understand what he meant. "I'm ready," I tell Susan. She nods, reaching for her own pen to witness whatever I'm about to do. Before you hear what happens next, before you know what those 4 words are, you need to understand how I got here. You need to feel what I felt standing in that wedding venue holding a champagne glass that wasn't mine to break, watching my only child turn away from me like I was a stranger. You need to know about the sacrifice. You need to know about the land that doesn't belong to me anymore. 3 weeks earlier, my alarm went off at 4:47 a.m. I didn't need it. I'd been awake since 4, staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, watching the darkness soften into gray. My heart had been pounding for hours, the kind of nervous energy that comes before something important, before your child's wedding day. I slipped out of bed quietly, though there was no one there to wake. Just the sound of the Georgia morning settling around the farmhouse crickets, still singing the heat, already building even in August's pre-dawn darkness. In the kitchen, I spread the dress across the back of the chair, navy blue knee-length, the kind of formal thing I never wore. $200. I'd counted out the cash at the store, and the cashier's eyes had flickered with something pity maybe as she rang it up. I didn't let it bother me then. Alexis had specifically asked for formal attire for the family, and I wasn't going to show up to my only child's wedding looking anything less than put together. My hands shook a little as I buttoned it up. Not from cold, from something else, something I couldn't quite name. In my purse, tucked carefully into an envelope, was the wedding gift. $12,000. Every overtime shift I'd picked up at the hospital over the past year. Every weekend I'd skipped my own rest. Every time I'd stood on my feet until they swelled, helping families who needed in-home care so I could save this money for my daughter's special day. $12,000 meant to represent all the years of love, sacrifice, and belief in her future. I'd planned to hand it to her quietly during the reception, during one of those rare moments when we might be alone together. I imagined the conversation, how I'd tell her how proud I was, how much her father would have loved to see this, how beautiful she looked as a bride. Leonard. The thought of him always came at moments like this. He'd been gone 14 years now, but sometimes I could still hear his voice. "She's going to be such a beautiful woman, Joyce," he'd said when Alexis was born. "You're going to be so proud." I grabbed my purse and keys. The drive to Atlanta took an hour and a half from Bibb County. I left at 5:15 before the sun had finished rising and pointed my old sedan toward the city. The road was mostly empty, just me and a few truckers headed the same direction. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I drove, and I tried to settle the flutter in my chest. Why was I so nervous? My father used to say that a mother knows things. That instinct runs deeper than logic. "Trust your gut, Joyce," he'd told me years ago when I was young and scared of making the wrong choices. Your body knows what your mind hasn't figured out yet. But my gut was telling me that everything would change, that today would matter in ways I couldn't predict. I pushed the thought away and focused on the road. The wedding venue was a beautiful place, a converted barn with ivy crawling up the stone walls and massive windows that let in the August light. Alexis had found it online months ago and immediately called to tell me about it. She'd sounded so happy then, so full of dreams. I pulled into the parking lot at 9:45 a.m., nearly 2 hours early. Perfect. Time to help with whatever needed doing. As I stepped out of the car and smoothed down my navy dress, I could see them already, the florists arranging towering displays of white roses, the caterers carrying boxes toward the kitchen entrance, the event coordinator moving from station to station with her tablet clutched to her chest. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, not the actual ceremony, though I wanted to see that too, but this moment right here, being needed, being useful, being part of something bigger than myself. It was only later, after everything fell apart, that I'd understand those early morning hours differently, that I'd realize my unease hadn't been warning me about what was coming. It had been something else entirely. It had been goodbye. The receiving line had dissolved by 9 o'clock. The DJ had cranked up something with heavy bass, and all around me people were laughing, distant cousins, Alexis's college friends, Christopher's family. I was still in my navy dress, standing near the dessert station with a glass of water. That's when I spotted them. Alexis and Christopher, my daughter, and her new husband were moving through the crowd like they owned the room. Alexis was laughing, her white dress pristine. Christopher had his hand on her back, guiding her with the easy confidence of a man used to being in control. They looked happy. I moved toward them, weaving between tables. I just wanted to catch my daughter's eye, maybe steal a moment alone with her. The moment I'd been imagining all morning. Alexis, sweetheart. I started reaching for her arm. Her face changed instantly. Not the radiant bride anymore. Something shuddered behind her eyes. She glanced at Christopher, then back to me, and I saw her shoulders stiffen. "Mom," she used the word like a warning. "Can we talk for a minute?" I asked softly. "Just the two of us." Alexis's jaw tightened. She took a step back from me, and that small movement cut through me like a knife. "Christopher doesn't want you here," she said quietly. The words didn't make sense. I actually laughed, because surely she meant something else. "What do you mean?" I asked. He doesn't want me. Where? Here, at the reception. Alexis's voice was flat, like she was reading from a script. He says you're always trying to control everything, that you make him uncomfortable. I couldn't breathe. Alexis, I haven't even spoken to Christopher since the ceremony. I know, but he saw the way you were looking at things. He said you were giving off a controlling energy. Controlling energy? From a woman who'd contributed money she didn't have. From a woman who'd been here since before sunrise to help. Con, I only came early because you asked me to. I know, Mom. For just a moment, Alexis's voice softened. Maybe this was a misunderstanding. Maybe she'd come back to me. But Christopher thinks it would be better if you left. The word hung between us, left. He thinks, I repeated slowly, or you think, Alexis wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Mom, I really am, but you have to go. Now! I opened my mouth, closed it. My hands were shaking. I could see them trembling at my sides like they belonged to someone else. Okay, I heard myself say. My voice sounded very far away. I didn't hug her, didn't kiss her cheek, didn't say any of the things I'd planned all morning. I just turned and walked back through the reception, my heels clicking against the marble, a sound like a countdown, like a clock marking the end of something. The lobby was cooler, quieter. The glass doors opened onto the parking lot, and the August heat hit me like a physical force. I sat in my car for a long time. I didn't turn on the engine. I didn't cry. I just sat there, my hands gripping the wheel, my navy dress suddenly feeling like armor that hadn't protected me at all. Outside, the Georgia sun beat down on the windshield. Inside, everything had gone very, very cold. Finally, I turned the key in the ignition. The engine rumbled to life beneath the hood of my sedan, 14 years old, now reliable as Leonard had always been. I sat for a moment in the parking lot of that elegant venue, my hands gripping the steering wheel, like it was the only solid thing left in my world. Around me, the late August evening pressed down with humid weight. The sky had turned that particular shade of purple-gray that comes just before real darkness settles in. No radio, no podcasts, no music playing softly to fill the silence. Just me, the road, and the questions that wouldn't stop circling. The tires hummed against the asphalt as I merged onto the highway heading south toward Bibb County. The sound of the engine, steady and mechanical, became the only voice I wanted to hear. The wind whispered through the cracked window. I'd never gotten around to fixing that, and somewhere in that familiar landscape of rural Georgia, I was supposed to find my way back home. What did I do wrong? The question arrived without warning, uninvited and sharp. It lodged itself in my chest like something that had been thrown there with force. For 30 years, I'd worked the night shifts at the hospital. 12-hour stretches on my feet, my compression socks digging into my calves, my back screaming by hour 9. I'd come home at dawn to a quiet house and Alexis, my baby girl, already up for school, her backpack waiting by the door. How much did I sacrifice for her? Every dollar had mattered. I'd saved those $12,000 in that white envelope, one shift at a time. Summer camps, new clothes when hers wore thin, ballet lessons she'd asked for in middle school even though we couldn't quite afford them. When Leonard died 14 years ago when she was only 9 years old, I'd never once let her feel the weight of grief without someone holding her through it. That someone was always me. Why did she treat me like that? My hands trembled slightly on the wheel. I noticed it with a strange detachment as if I was observing someone else's hands. My jaw had clenched so tightly I could feel the muscle working beneath my skin. But I wasn't crying. Crying would have been easier somehow. Crying would have been a release. Instead, I sat with this cold, hollow feeling, the kind of silence that echoes louder than any scream. The highway stretched ahead of me, mile after mile of darkness, broken only by the occasional set of headlights passing in the opposite direction. I thought about the nights Leonard and I had made this drive together, how he'd always insisted on driving so I could rest. He'd play classical music softly on the radio and reach over to squeeze my hand. "You're a good mother," he'd told me once. "Alexis is lucky to have you." But Alexis didn't feel lucky today, and I wasn't feeling like a good mother. The road wound through familiar territory, past the small towns, whose names I knew by heart, past the turnoffs I'd memorized decades ago. An hour and a half. That was all it took to get from that beautiful venue in Atlanta back to my real life. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, except for the porch light I'd left burning before I'd left that morning. Was it just this morning? It felt like years ago. I sat in the car, the engine still running, staring at those weathered boards and the front door that suddenly felt like a stranger's door. I couldn't go inside yet. Something was shifting inside me, something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger exactly. It was colder than that, more purposeful. And tomorrow morning I could feel it coming like a storm on the horizon. Tomorrow everything was going to change again. But tonight I just sat in the darkness and listened to the wind. The morning sun was already brutal by 8:30 a.m. I was on my knees in the garden behind the house, my hands deep in the soil pulling at the weeds that had overtaken the vegetable beds while I was gone. The dirt was warm and damp, and there was something almost meditative about the work, the simple repetitive motion of yanking unwanted growth from the earth. It was easier to focus on the weeds than to think about yesterday, easier to let my muscles ache than to feel the hollow space that had opened up inside my chest. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost didn't answer. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something made me check, and when I saw Alexis's name on the screen, I wiped my hands on my jeans and picked up. Mom. Her voice sounded different, not angry like it had been at the venue, not cold. Instead, she sounded rushed, energetic even. I'm sorry about yesterday. I have an important question for you. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting. I'm listening, sweetheart. What is it? Mom, can you send me the property documents? The ones about the land? The words didn't make sense at first. I held the phone closer to my ear, certain I'd misheard. Property documents, Alexis, what are you talking about? The farm, Mom, the one Grandpa bought. We need it. My hands went cold despite the heat of the morning. I moved toward the porch, needing to sit down. Your farm? The one Leonard's father bought, sweetheart. Why would you? We have a big project. She interrupted, and I could hear something else in her voice now, a tone I'd never heard from my daughter before. It was businesslike, detached. Christopher and we want to develop real estate. I sat down on the porch step, the phone pressed tight against my ear. What do you mean, develop real estate? We could subdivide it, she said, and the words came quickly now like she'd rehearsed them. Into maybe 12, 15 lots. We'll build modern homes on the property. Modern houses, Mom. This would be a huge project. The returns would be enormous. I couldn't speak. My mind felt foggy, like I was trying to understand words in a language I'd never learned. This was Alexis, my Alexis, who'd spent her childhood riding her bicycle around that farm, who'd helped me plant tomatoes in the summer, who understood what that land meant to our family. Alexis, I finally managed. Can you explain this more? Yesterday, you didn't say anything about... Mom, we need an answer soon. There was an edge to her voice now, impatient. There's an investor interested. This is time-sensitive. The words landed like stones in still water, each one creating ripples that disturbed everything around it. I'd been thrown out of my daughter's wedding just 16 hours ago, and now she wanted the one piece of my family's history I had left, the land that Leonard had entrusted to me, the legacy that stretched back 70 years. Alexis, I need time to... Mom, she said, and her voice suddenly softened, became almost sweet. But that's not even the biggest part. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Christopher wants to tell you something himself, and Mom... I think you need to know what he's really offering. The line crackled with static, or maybe that was just the rushing sound of everything I thought I knew, crumbling. Mom, we will take care of you, Alexis said, and I could hear something shifting in her tone, something harder. We're going to split the money with you, 40%. You'll make at least $200,000, maybe more. $200,000. The number hung in the air between us, and for a moment I couldn't speak. Not because I was tempted, but because I was confused. My daughter, the girl I'd raised, the one who'd cried in my arms when her father died, was talking about our family land like it was a commodity, like it was something to be sliced up and sold to the highest bidder. Alexis, I said quietly, that's not just property, that's our legacy. Your great-grandfather bought that land in 1954. It's been in our family for 70 years. Mom, if you don't cooperate." She paused and I heard her take a breath. When she spoke again, her voice had gone completely flat. "Christopher said I need to be honest with you." My chest tightened. "Honest about what? If you don't help us, he's going to have to tell people that you're controlling, that you have an unhealthy need to keep me under your thumb. He's going to say that you won't let us live our own lives, that you're manipulative." I stood up from the porch step, my legs suddenly unsteady. "Alexis, that's a direct threat." "It's not a threat, Mom. It's reality. That's what he'll have to do." The words "have to" landed like a slap, as if Christopher Sterling was some passive observer forced into this position, as if my daughter's husband, a man I'd only just met, was being compelled by circumstances beyond his control to destroy my reputation. "Listen to me," I said, and my voice sounded strange even to my own ears, thin, old. "Your husband is a stranger to me. I don't know him. I don't know what he wants from—" "Christopher is a successful businessman, Mom," she interrupted. "He knows real estate development. He's managed projects before. He understands how to maximize returns." But I wasn't hearing Alexis anymore. Not really. The words coming through the phone, they were too polished, too rehearsed, too much like a script someone had written for her to recite. I realized with a sick, sinking feeling that every word my daughter was speaking, Christopher had put in her mouth first. "How long has he been planning this?" I asked. There was a pause, a hesitation that told me everything. "Mom, he's just trying to help us build a future. That's not what this is," I said quietly. "This isn't about building anything. This is about taking what isn't yours to take. Mom, we need an answer fast." Alexis said, her voice becoming clipped again. "Christopher's uncle has a meeting with investors on Thursday. We need to show them that we have control of the property." Thursday. I looked at the calendar hanging on the kitchen wall. Today was Monday. 4 days. 4 days to watch my daughter be used as a weapon against me. 4 days to understand that everything at that wedding, the dismissal, the coldness, had been leading to this moment. "That's not enough time, Alexis." "It has to be, Mom. Call me back soon, okay?" The line went dead. For exactly 47 seconds, there was silence. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still pressed against my ear, listening to nothing. And then the buzzing started. 1 call, 2 calls, 3. My phone began to vibrate in my hand like it was alive, like it was trying to escape. Alexis, again and again. 10 times in the next hour. 11 times. 12. The notifications kept piling up on my screen like accusation. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because I was beginning to understand something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't my daughter calling anymore. This was desperation. This was hunger. This was a man who saw an elderly woman and her farm as the quickest route to wealth, and he was using the only leverage he had, the person I loved most, to get it. And she didn't even seem to realize what was happening to her. 2 days after that call, I made a decision. I couldn't sit in my house anymore, paralyzed by indecision. Couldn't spend another sleepless night staring at the ceiling, replaying Alexis's voice in my head, trying to parse the difference between the daughter I knew and the stranger speaking those words. The calls had continued 47 times in that first day, then 32 times the next. I'd stopped counting after that. The weight of each notification felt like a small stone being added to my chest. I needed help, real help, the kind only a lawyer could provide. The drive to Macon took 40 minutes. Susan Matthews's office was in a modest brick building downtown, the kind of place that had probably been there for decades. I sat in the waiting room for exactly 5 minutes before she came out to greet me. Susan was in her early 60s with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun and the kind of eyes that had seen too much human pain to be easily shocked by anything. "Joyce," she said, extending her hand, "come in." Her office was small, but orderly books on family law stacked along the shelves, diplomas from universities I'd never heard of, photographs of what I assumed were her own children. She gestured for me to sit in the leather chair across from her desk, and I did, my purse clutched tightly in my lap like it contained everything I had left to lose. "Tell me what's happened," Susan said simply. So I did. I told her about the wedding, about being asked to leave. I told her about the calls, about Christopher's offer, about the threats, about the way my daughter's voice had changed when she repeated someone else's words. I told her about 70 years of family history, about Leonard, about working night shifts to keep that land safe for the next generation. My voice didn't shake. I didn't cry. But when I finished, I felt completely hollowed out, like I'd poured everything that mattered into her small, quiet office. Susan didn't interrupt once. She just listened, her pen moving across her notepad in steady, measured strokes. When I finally stopped talking, she set the pen down and looked at me directly. "Joyce, I need you to listen to something," she said. "What your daughter's husband is doing, what he's pressuring your daughter to help him do this, isn't just about money. This is about control. This is about a man seeing an opportunity and exploiting the most vulnerable person he could find to access it. I don't even know who Christopher Sterling is," I said. "I met him for the first time at the wedding." "That's precisely the problem," Susan said. She turned to her computer. "Give me 24 hours. I'm going to run a background check on Christopher Sterling. I have some contacts in the real estate business. I want to know what he's been doing for the past 10 years. For the first time in 3 days, I felt something other than panic. It was fragile, uncertain, but it was there. It was hope. It was the feeling of being believed. "You don't think I'm overreacting?" I asked. "You don't think I'm being controlling?" Susan looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Joyce, you are a mother. You worked night shifts for years to provide for your daughter. You built a life. And when someone tries to take that from you when they use your daughter as a tool to do it, you're not being controlling. You're being protective. There's a difference, an important one." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Come back tomorrow afternoon," Susan said. "I'll have answers for you." I drove home in a daze, the late September sun casting long shadows across the highway. For the first time since the wedding, I felt like I wasn't completely alone, like someone understood what was happening, like there might be a way through this. That night, around 5 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Susan. "Joyce." Susan's voice came through clear and sharp. "I have the information you asked for. Are you somewhere private?" I straightened up immediately, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Yes, I'm at home. Tell me." There was a pause just long enough for my heart to begin pounding. "Joyce, what I found, it's not good. It's significantly worse than I thought it would be." I moved toward the porch, my legs suddenly weak. "Go ahead." "Christopher Sterling has been involved in at least 3 major lawsuits over the past decade," Susan said. She was reading from something, papers rustling in the background. 2015, he was sued for real estate fraud, promised investors a certain return on a development project, and then diverted the funds. The case was settled, but he paid out significant damages. "Oh my God," I whispered. 2018, another lawsuit. Contract violation on a property development deal. Again settled, but expensive for him. Then in 2021, he was named in a case involving misappropriation of investor funds. "Joyce, these aren't accidents. This is a pattern." I sat down hard on the porch step, my legs no longer willing to hold me up. "You're telling me my daughter married a—" "Let me finish," Susan said. "His personal life is equally revealing. He's been married twice before Alexis. The first marriage lasted 2 years. His ex-wife, when contacted by my investigator, said, and I'm quoting here, he used money as a tool of control. He would withhold it, use it as punishment. I was so relieved to get away from him. The second marriage lasted 3 years. That ex-wife said something similar. He never loved me. He was after my family money. Once it became clear there wasn't as much as he thought, he left." The world tilted beneath me. "Susan, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that Christopher Sterling is a man with a demonstrated history of exploiting women for their assets. And Joyce, your daughter, she fits his pattern perfectly. Young, naive, recently married and heir to valuable property. But he has no money of his own." I asked, my voice small and strange. "None. He has approximately $150,000 in outstanding debt from failed projects. Banks won't touch him. He has no house, no car worth anything, nothing of value. But your farm, Joyce, that's worth a considerable amount. Even subdivided and developed quickly, it could generate millions." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I was thinking about Alexis's voice on the phone, the way the words didn't sound like her, the way everything she'd said had been too practiced, too scripted. Someone else's words coming out of my daughter's mouth. He's using her, I said finally. Yes, Susan said. He's using her. But more than that, Joyce, I need you to understand something. He's isolating her, getting her to turn against the people who care about her. The way he manipulated her into asking you for the land, the way he's put her in the position of threatening you, this is classic emotional abuse. He's making her the instrument of his own ambitions. I thought about the coldness in Alexis's voice, the distance that had opened up between us like a chasm, and I realized that Christopher Sterling hadn't just tried to take my farm. He'd tried to take my daughter. Why, what do? I asked. How do I protect her? How do I protect the land? Susan was quiet for a moment. There's a legal mechanism that's extremely powerful in situations like this. It's specifically designed for what you're facing. But Joyce, I need you to be very sure about this. Once we set it in motion, there's no going back. It will protect the property permanently. It will make it impossible for anyone to sell or develop it. And it will send a very clear message to Christopher Sterling that he cannot have what he wants. What is it? I asked. Come to my office tomorrow morning, Susan said. I'll explain everything, but Joyce, I want you to think about this tonight. Think about whether you're ready to make a permanent decision to protect something that clearly matters more to your family than anything else. Because that's what this is about. Not revenge. Protection. After we hung up, I sat in my garden as the sun sank lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the 55 acres that my great-grandfather had bought 70 years ago. For the first time since the wedding, I knew exactly what I had to do. There's a legal mechanism called a conservation trust, Susan said, sitting across from me in her office. Morning light streamed through the window behind her. It's designed specifically for situations like yours. I leaned forward. What does it do? The property is transferred to the trust, Susan explained carefully. Once that happens, it no longer belongs to you individually. The land becomes protected permanently. It can never be sold. It can never be subdivided. It can never be developed. The trust manages it, maintains it in its current state forever. But what about Alexis? I asked. What about her inheritance? That's the crucial part, Susan said. Once property is in a conservation trust, it can't be passed down to heirs traditionally. The land is no longer yours to leave to anyone. It belongs to the trust. Alexis will have no claim to it. Neither will Christopher Sterling. Neither will anyone. I sat back trying to process. So I'd be giving up the farm. You'd be protecting it, Susan corrected gently. There's a difference. You wouldn't be losing it. You'd be ensuring that no one, not your daughter, not her husband, not any future crisis could take it or destroy it. I thought about the weeds in my garden, about protecting what matters. And once you sign, it's irrevocable. No going back. This is permanent, Joyce. I need you to understand that weight. I nodded. If I do this, Christopher gets nothing. Christopher gets nothing, Susan confirmed. And more importantly, Alexis is protected from him. His leverage disappears. But Alexis will hate me, I said quietly. Possibly. For a while, Susan said. But Joyce, I need to tell you something else. Something I found. She pulled out a file from her desk drawer. When I was researching Christopher's background, I contacted the law firm that represented you and Leonard. They had old documents in storage. My heart raced. What kind of documents? Joyce, your husband Leonard, he set something in motion before he died. 14 years ago, knowing he was dying, he consulted about protecting the farm. He left very specific instructions. Susan opened the file and read, her voice quiet and respectful. If there ever comes a time when someone threatens this land, when the family's legacy is at risk, the Conservation Trust should be activated. Joyce will have the authority to make that decision. This is my final gift to my wife and my daughter, the assurance that no matter what happens, this land will be protected. Even if Alexis doesn't understand now, even if she resists, she will benefit from this protection. Some inheritances aren't about money or property. Some are about preservation. Some are about love expressed through permanence. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Leonard had thought of this. 14 years ago, knowing he was leaving us, he had made a plan for this exact moment. He knew, I whispered. Leonard knew something like this might happen. He didn't know the specifics, Susan said gently, but he understood human nature. He understood that greed could creep in, that his daughter might one day face a choice between her own ambitions and her family's legacy. So he gave you this tool, this protection. I stood and walked to the window. Below the city moved forward people going about their days, unaware of the battles being fought in quiet rooms like this. I'm going to sign, I said. Joyce, I need you to be absolutely certain. I'm certain, I said, turning back. Leonard was certain. And if he believed I would need this, then I trust that belief. I trust him, even now, even from wherever he is. Susan nodded slowly. We'll prepare the documents. We can execute this in approximately 1 month. That gives you time to be absolutely sure. 1 month later, I walked back into Susan's office. The late October afternoon was cool, the kind of autumn day that made you remember why you loved Georgia in the first place. The leaves were turning gold and crimson, and there was a crispness in the air that felt like clarity. Susan had called that morning to tell me the documents were ready. The time had come. She was waiting for me at her desk, and the stack of papers was impossible to miss. There had to be at least 40 pages, all neatly bound and organized with colored tabs marking important sections. Joyce, Susan said, standing to greet me, "Are you ready for this?" I sat down without answering. My eyes went directly to the title page where the words Conservation Trust Agreement were printed in bold black letters. Below that, my name, Joyce Bennett. This was it. I'm going to read through this with you, Susan said, settling back into her chair. Page by page, I want you to understand every single thing you're signing. She began on page 1 explaining the basic structure of the trust, how the property would be transferred into a legal entity designed specifically to protect it, how that entity would exist in perpetuity, governed by trustees who had a legal obligation to maintain the land according to the terms she and I had established. Pages 6 through 10 detailed the protective mechanisms. The land could never be subdivided. It could never be developed for commercial purposes. It could never be sold. It would remain in its current state a working agricultural property forever, or as close to forever as the legal system could guarantee. This section here, Susan said, pointing to page 15, explains the governance. A board of trustees will oversee the property. They'll make decisions about its maintenance and use. But Joyce, the important thing is this: no individual family member can override their decisions. No heir can come forward and demand access or control. The trust is the owner now. You're simply the original settler. I nodded, absorbing each word. My eyes kept drifting to page 21, where a single word was printed in letters so large I could read it from across the desk. Irrevocable. That's the key word, Susan said, following my gaze. Once you sign, there's no changing your mind. No legal mechanism to undo this. It's permanent. I thought about the land. 70 years of history lived on those 55 acres. My great-grandfather William had purchased this property in 1954 with money he'd saved his entire life. He'd built a house on it, cleared the fields, established it as a working farm that sustained generations of our family. My father had taken that inheritance and protected it. He'd worked the land, maintained the fences, kept the soil healthy. He'd understood what it meant to be a steward of something bigger than himself. And then Leonard. Leonard had loved that land like it was part of his own body. He'd walked those fields in the early morning before work. He'd planned improvements he never got to see completed. And before he died, knowing he wouldn't be there to protect it, he'd created this mechanism, this safeguard, this final act of love. And now it was my turn to protect it. Not for Alexis, not even for myself, but for what it represented. For the principle that some things, the important things, shouldn't be reduced to dollar signs and development plans. Some things were supposed to last. Joyce. Susan's voice brought me back. Do you understand everything? I do, I said. And you're certain? Because once you sign tomorrow, I'm certain, I said. The steadiness in my own voice surprised me. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt perfectly calm, perfectly sure. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Susan smiled slightly. Your husband would be proud. I thought about Leonard, about him reaching across 14 years to help me make this decision, to tell me in words written down and filed away in a lawyer's office that I wasn't alone in protecting what mattered. Tomorrow morning, I said, I'll sign. The morning sun filtered through Susan's office windows as I sat at her desk. The pen felt heavy in my hand. Not physically, it was just a standard ballpoint pen from her desk holder, but it felt heavy in the way that decisions feel heavy, the way 70 years of history feels heavy, the way love and protection and sacrifice feel heavy. I looked at the blank line waiting for my signature, just a few inches of white paper where my name would go and everything would change forever. I touched pen to paper. The first letter, J. Leonard on his deathbed, his hand cold in mine, his voice barely a whisper. Protect the farm, Joyce. Promise me. I was so young then, and I didn't know yet how desperately I would need to keep that promise. The second letter, O. My father in his work boots pulling weeds from the garden at dawn. Every morning of my childhood he was there. 40 years of stewardship. 40 years of understanding that land wasn't just property, it was responsibility. This is ours, he'd tell me, and we take care of what's ours. The third letter, Y. My great-grandfather William, a man I'd never met except through stories. He'd lost 3 fingers in an accident at the factory. He'd saved every penny for 30 years to buy this land. This is the future, he'd told my father. This is security. This is legacy. The fourth letter, C. Alexis as a newborn so small she fit in the crook of my arm. I'd brought her to the farm when she was 3 days old, walking her through the fields in the early morning. I'd made her a promise, this will be yours, always. The fifth letter, E. But yours doesn't mean to destroy. It doesn't mean to sell. It doesn't mean to hand over to a man who sees it as money. Ownership was sacred, and some people didn't understand that. The sixth letter, B. Alexis at 9 years old, standing in the field after Leonard's funeral. The grass was up to her waist. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. I held her and said, the farm will always be here. We will always be here. The seventh letter, E. If I don't sign, Christopher wins. If I don't sign, he slices this land into pieces and turns it into something unrecognizable. My daughter becomes a victim and I become complicit. The eighth letter, N. But if I do sign, I lose ownership. I lose the ability to pass it down. I lose the tangible connection to the land I've cared for my entire life. The ninth letter, N. No, that's wrong. I'm not losing anything. I'm saving it. I'm protecting it from people who would destroy it. I'm preserving it for generations not yet born. The 10th letter, E. I'm not giving it away. I'm entrusting it to time, to the earth itself, to the principle that some things are too important to be owned by any single person. The 11th letter, T. The signature was complete. Joyce Bennett. In that moment, my phone began to vibrate. Alexis. Call 52, 53, 54. The notifications kept coming one after another like a heartbeat made of desperation. Each one a small accusation, each one a plea. Each one a demand I couldn't answer. I set the phone face down on Susan's desk and didn't look at it. Sign here as well, Susan said, gently pointing to another line. She added her own signature below mine. Then she wrote the date, October 15th, 2024. And beneath that, in neat legal script, witness to irrevocable conservation trust agreement. The word irrevocable seemed to glow on the page. It's done, Susan said quietly. The documents will be filed with the state within 48 hours. Once they're processed, this becomes official, permanent. There's no legal mechanism to undo it. I know, I said. My voice was steady, calm, and I will never try to undo it. My phone vibrated again. 55 calls now, 56. The screen kept lighting up with Alexis's name, desperate and relentless. I looked at Susan. She nodded slightly, understanding, without words. For the first time since the wedding, I answered one of those calls. Before I tell you the 4 words that changed everything, comment a number below. Any number. Just let me know you're here with me. Because what happens next is where everything falls apart, where I finally stand up, where my daughter learns the truth. Comment now. Then stick around. And quick note, what comes next has some elements reimagined for storytelling. Not everything is exactly as it happened. If you'd rather leave here, that's okay. But if you want to see how this family survives breaking point, stay with me. Let's go. I walked out of Susan's office into the October afternoon and immediately dialed Alexis's number. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. For the first time since the wedding, I was choosing to make this call. I was choosing when, where, and how this conversation would happen. She answered on the first ring. "Mom, finally, I've been calling you all day." Her voice was high, urgent, tinged with something that sounded almost like panic. "Mom, you're going to send me the documents right. The property deeds." "Alexis," I said quietly, "I need to tell you some very important things." "Yes, Mom, okay, but first, I know about Christopher Sterling," I interrupted. My voice was gentle but firm. "I know everything." There was a pause, a hesitation that told me she understood something had shifted. "What do you mean, Mom?" "I know he's been married twice before you. I know both of his ex-wives said the same thing, that he only wanted their money, that he used money as a tool of control, that when he realized they didn't have as much as he thought, he left them." "Mom, you're wrong. I know he has $150,000 in debt from failed projects. I know banks won't lend to him. I know he owns nothing of value. No house, no car, nothing." "Mom," her voice cracked, "you don't understand him. Alexis Christopher doesn't love you," I said, and I could hear the pain in my own voice. "I'm so sorry to say that to you, but I have to, because you deserve to know the truth." "How dare you?" she shouted. "You don't know anything about my marriage." "Today I transferred the farm to a conservation trust," I said. The words came out steady and clear. There was complete silence. For a moment, I thought the line had gone dead. "Then what?" "The property is now protected in perpetuity. It can never be sold. It can never be subdivided. It can never be developed. You will never have the ability to do what Christopher asked you to do." "Mom, you can't do that." Her voice had risen to a scream. "That's my inheritance. That's mine." "Alexis, you're going to destroy my future. You're an evil person. I hate you. I'm going to sue you." "Yal, so asantris." "Sweetheart, how could you be so cruel? How could you take away everything from me?" I listened to my daughter's rage, her desperation, her heartbreak, and I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I just held the phone and let her feel what she needed to feel. When her voice grew hoarse, when the screaming turned to sobs, I spoke. "It's not yours anymore, Alexis." The words hung in the space between us. 4 words, the ones I'd been saving for this moment, the ones that changed everything. "I will never forgive you," she whispered. "Never." "I know," I said. "But Alexis, I had to do this, because I love you, because I need to protect you from him." "You don't get to decide what's best for me." "You're right," I said. "I don't. But I get to decide what happens to my family's legacy, and I choose to protect it. I choose to protect you, even if you hate me for it." There was another long silence. "Goodbye, Alexis," I said quietly. I ended the call before she could respond. My phone immediately lit up again. Call 57, 58, 59. Text messages began flooding in, one after another like a storm of words. "Mom, answer. You can't do this. I'm calling a lawyer. You've ruined my life. How could you? Please call me back." I stood in the parking lot of Susan's office building, watching the notifications accumulate on my screen, and I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I got in my car and drove home to my empty house and the land that was no longer mine to lose. Because I'd finally realized the truth, I'd never owned that farm. I'd only ever been its caretaker. And now I was entrusting it to something bigger than myself. 6 months had passed. Spring had arrived in Georgia with the kind of insistence that made you believe in renewal. The trees had leafed out again. The garden I'd planted in October was now full of early vegetables pushing through the soil. My work as a home care nurse kept me busy. The elderly never stopped needing attention, and there was something grounding about that. Something real. The phone calls from Alexis had stopped after that first terrible conversation. I'd waited for weeks, then months, for some sign that she wanted to talk to me, some indication that she was ready to listen. But nothing came. Just silence. A silence so complete it felt like a different kind of pain. I'd learned to live with it. Then one afternoon in April, while I was pruning the roses, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something made me look at the screen, and when I saw Alexis's name, my heart stopped. "Hello," I said carefully. "Mom." Her voice was so small, so broken. Nothing like the confident, sharp voice that had demanded my family's land. "Mom, it's me." "Alexis," I said, just her name, just my daughter's name spoken like a prayer. "Mom, I need to talk to you." "Of course, sweetheart. I'm listening." "Christopher left me," she said. And then she started to cry. Not angry tears like before. These were the tears of someone completely shattered. He said he couldn't wait anymore. He said if I couldn't give him access to money or property, there was no point in staying. I said nothing, I just listened. He found someone else, Mom, a woman with money. Apparently she's been interested in him for months. He just left. He took his things and he left. "Oh, Alexis," I whispered. "Mom, I was so stupid." She sobbed. "I was so blind. You were right about everything. He didn't love me. He never loved me. He just wanted the farm. When he couldn't get it, he just left. Like I meant nothing." I could hear the sound of her crying, the kind of crying that comes from deep inside, from a place where all your illusions have finally shattered. "Konya," I said softly, using the Vietnamese words I hadn't used with her since she was small. "I'm so sorry." "Mom, I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. I'm sorry I let him manipulate me. I'm sorry I said all those terrible things to you." "Alexis." "Mom, I don't have anywhere to go. I'm at a friend's house, but I can't stay here much longer. I don't have money for a deposit on an apartment. I spent everything trying to make the wedding perfect, trying to make him happy. And now, I have nothing." I stood in my garden surrounded by the evidence of 6 months of quiet living. The roses I'd pruned back were blooming again. The vegetables were growing. The land was still here, still protected, still exactly what it had always been meant to be. "Alexis, do you want me to come get you?" There was a long pause, and then she started crying so hard she could barely breathe. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Mom, please come get me. Please bring me home." I set down my pruning shears and walked inside to get my keys. As I moved through my house toward the door, I thought about Leonard, about my father, about my great-grandfather, William, about all the people who had fought to protect this land, and about how protecting it had ultimately meant protecting my daughter from a man who would have used her and destroyed her. I had made the right choice, and now finally I was going to bring my daughter home. 3 months after Alexis came home, a letter arrived. It was delivered on a July afternoon when the heat had settled over the farm like a living thing. I was in the garden pulling weeds when I heard the mailbox close. The carrier waved. I waved back and walked to collect the mail. Most of it was ordinary bills, advertisements, a magazine subscription, but there was one envelope that stopped me. White, plain. My name written on the front in handwriting I recognized immediately. For Mom. I stood in the driveway holding that envelope for a long moment before opening it. The letter inside was written on plain paper, several pages filled with Alexis's handwriting from top to bottom. Her letters were slightly crooked the way they always were when she was emotional, but the words were careful, deliberate. I read it once standing right there in the driveway. Then I read it again moving to the porch. By the 3rd time I was sitting in the rocking chair Leonard and I had bought 30 years ago, and I couldn't see the words because my vision had blurred. Dear Mom, I'm writing this because I don't know how to say these things out loud. I'm sorry. I know 2 words aren't enough, but I'm saying it anyway. I'm sorry for the wedding. I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for how I treated you like you were the enemy when you were only trying to protect me. I'm sorry because I wanted to sell the farm. I wanted to take something in our family for 70 years and hand it to a man I'd known less than 2 years. I wanted to destroy something beautiful because I was greedy and naive. Now I understand what Christopher was doing. He was using me, manipulating me, turning me into a weapon against you, and you saw it immediately. You saw it and protected me. You protected the land. You protected our family's legacy. You did the thing I couldn't do for myself. Dad left me a letter before he died. You gave it to me last week. He wrote, "Alexis, one day you'll choose between money and the people who truly love you. Choose right." I didn't choose right, Mom. I chose so wrong, but you chose right for me, even though it meant I would hate you, even though it meant losing me for a while. I can't undo what I said. I can't take back the threats or the coldness or the way I let Christopher poison my mind against you, but I can try to be better. I can try to deserve a mother who would sacrifice her own relationship with her daughter to protect what matters. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I'm asking anyway because I'm tired of this weight. I'm tired of knowing I hurt the one person who never stopped loving me. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry. Alexis. I held the letter in my hands for a long time after finishing. The afternoon light was changing, turning golden. Shadows of the garden lengthened across the lawn. Somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird was singing at dusk. I didn't rush to write a response. I didn't call her immediately. I just sat there with the letter, reading it over and over, letting each word sink deeper. This wasn't full reconciliation. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something. It was my daughter finally seeing clearly, finally understanding that love and protection sometimes look the same. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a small wooden box on my desk. Not hidden, not discarded, just kept, just preserved, just held gently in my hands the way I was learning to hold so many broken things and let them begin to heal. 3 months after receiving Alexis's letter, I started something new. It was October again, full circle, exactly 1 year since I'd signed the Conservation Trust documents. The autumn air was crisp and the farm looked different to me now. Not because it had changed physically, but because I had changed. Because I finally understood what it was meant to be. I'd contacted an organization in Macon that worked with underserved children. Kids from families struggling with poverty. Kids who rarely got to leave the city. Kids who didn't know what open sky felt like. I'd offered my farm. Every Saturday morning, 15 to 20 children arrived on an old yellow bus. They poured out onto the property like water released from a dam running, laughing, their voices filling the spaces that had been so quiet for so long. I watched them discover things I'd taken for granted my entire life. The way grass felt under bare feet, the way dirt smelled after rain, the way stars looked when you lay on your back and just looked up. Miss Joyce. One small girl asked, tugging on my sleeve, "Why do we have to take care of this land?" I knelt down to her level. Because a long time ago, my great-grandfather bought this farm. He worked very hard to do it. He even lost 3 fingers at his job to save enough money. Then my father took care of it for 40 years. Then my husband loved it with all his heart. And now we all protect it together. "But why?" she pressed. "It's just dirt." "It's not just dirt," I said gently. "Legacy isn't about money. It's about love. It's about the people we care about and the values we want to pass down. It's about saying this matters. This will always matter. This belongs to all of us." The children planted seeds that had come from trees my great-grandfather had planted 70 years ago. They ran through fields my father had maintained. They slept under stars that Leonard had loved. And slowly the farm became something more than just land. It became a story, a living, breathing story that belonged to all of us. Alexis was there too. She lived in the house with me now, working as a freelance editor from her bedroom. Some days were still awkward between us. We hadn't had one of those grand reconciliation moments you read about in books. We just gradually started talking again, started laughing at small things, started remembering who we were to each other before Christopher Sterling had tried to poison that bond. She helped me with the children. She showed them how to edit stories they'd written. She taught them that their voices mattered, that their stories were worth telling. One afternoon, as we stood together watching a group of children plant new trees, Alexis reached over and squeezed my hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The squeeze said everything. I stood in the middle of the field that afternoon, surrounded by the evidence of 70 years of protection, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. The old oaks that my great-grandfather had planted still stood massive and solid. The soil that my father had tended was rich and dark. The fences that Leonard had repaired were still holding strong. And now, thanks to the Conservation Trust, they would stand forever. I had made the right choice. Even though it had cost me my daughter's love, even though it had meant sitting in silence for months, even though it had meant being willing to lose everything, I had made the right choice. My great-grandfather would have understood. My father would have understood. Leonard would have understood. And finally, so did Alexis. But deep in my heart, there was still an empty space. A place that would never be quite full again. Because some losses once made can never be unmade. Some relationships once broken never quite heal the same way. Still, I had learned to live with that empty space. And in learning to live with it, I'd found something unexpected. I'd found myself again. Now let me tell you something. I'm sitting beneath the willow tree Leonard planted 40 years ago. He's buried just over that hill in a cemetery overlooking the fields he loved. This is where I come to think, to remember, to understand why I did what I did. People ask, don't you regret it? The answer is no. I don't regret transferring the farm to a conservation trust. I don't regret those irrevocable documents. I regret that Alexis was vulnerable to Christopher Sterling. I regret the months she believed I was the villain, but I have never regretted protecting what matters most. Here's what I've learned. Love isn't always unconditional, and that's okay. I gave Alexis everything I could, my time, my resources, my sacrifice, but I couldn't give her the farm because it never belonged to me alone. It belonged to my great-grandfather with his broken hands, to my father who maintained it, to Leonard who loved it like his own soul, to the future, to children now running through these fields, to the earth itself. Real love has boundaries. The people who truly love us will never ask us to choose between loving them and protecting ourselves. They will never weaponize our children. They will never demand we sacrifice sacred things to prove devotion. Christopher Sterling didn't love Alexis. He loved what she represented, access to money, to property. I saved my daughter from him by drawing a line and refusing to cross it. Alexis's letter sits on my desk. I haven't answered yet, but I haven't deleted it either. One day, perhaps we'll talk about everything. Perhaps she'll understand why I did this. Perhaps she'll forgive me fully. But not yet. I still live here on these 55 acres. It's no longer mine individually. It belongs to the future. It will be protected forever for my daughter if she returns with an open heart for the children who come every Saturday, for everyone who needs to know that some things are sacred. Legacy isn't about money. It's about values. It's about love made permanent. I place my hand over my heart. Leonard, father, great-grandfather, you can rest now. I've kept the promise. The wind carries across the fields. The sun sets over land that will endure. And I finally understand I've forgiven myself. And to you listening to this story, remember this. I learned something I wish I'd known decades ago. God doesn't ask us to sacrifice everything. God asks us to protect what's sacred. There's a difference. God teaches us that love has boundaries. God shows us that sometimes saying no is the most loving thing we can do. And God reminds us that we are worthy of protecting ourselves just as we protect those we love. I didn't understand that when I was younger. I thought sacrifice meant giving away everything, my time, my money, my peace, even my family's legacy. I thought that's what mothers did. That's what daughters did. That's what love looked like. But I was wrong. If you're in a situation similar to mine, don't make my mistakes. Don't wait until your family turns against you to draw boundaries. Don't sacrifice sacred things trying to prove your love. Don't let guilt manipulate you into destroying what matters. Start now. Draw your line. Defend it. This is a family drama story that taught me more about myself than any other moment in my life. This grandma story isn't just about me protecting land, it's about protecting the values my family built. And if you love family drama stories that show real consequences, or if grandma stories about sacrifice and wisdom resonate with you, you already understand sometimes the most powerful choice is saying no. The pain of losing my daughter's love was real. The regret of being called cruel was heavy, but the peace of knowing I did the right thing that was worth every tear. I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me, what would you have done? Do you have your own family drama story? Have you ever had to choose between love and protection? I read every comment, and I want to hear your voice. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that boundaries aren't selfish. Subscribe to this channel if you love stories about real family drama and the grandma stories that shape generations. Hit like if you're learning like I did that sometimes. Love means letting go. If you're struggling with family conflict right now, know that you're not alone. There are resources, counselors, and people who understand. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Thank you for witnessing Joyce's journey. Thank you for caring enough to listen. A note: some stories that follow may contain fictional elements created for educational purposes. If you prefer different content, please feel free to explore other videos that better suit your interests. I'll see you in the next story. With gratitude and love,